Hi everyone, this is Heather Lockton from the Flourish.Academy. This is episode 541. Today we are talking about Mac operating systems. Again, it feels like we talk about this a lot, but hey, if you are not already involved in our free community group on Facebook, make sure you jump in there this week because we have free training that's happening on how to get sharper photos. Okay. So the announcement was made 2 weeks ago that Apple was releasing a new operating system called Big Sur. And I thought to myself, didn't they just release Catalina? And I looked it up, and the answer to that is no, they did not just release it. It was a year ago. So they release operating systems once a year, typically in the fall, late September and October. This year it was November. And the reason it feels to me like they are always updating operating systems is because I still have not updated my main working production machine. It's my iMac that's behind me. That's where all of the client work happens. I still have not updated that to Catalina. Why? Because I don't think that Apple and Adobe ever fully worked out their issues. Yes, I am running Catalina on my MacBook Pro, which is my test machine. It's the one I take with me on the road to teach, so it's not as important as my production machine, meaning I have time to play around with it. I have Catalina on here. It is working with Lightroom and Photoshop, although some strange things happen occasionally. The machine randomly reboots. It never did that before, so I was still hesitating to update my main working machine to Catalina. And then the next thing you know, here we are, and Big Sur is out. Well, I can promise you I am not updating to Big Sur, at least not in the near future. And as a general rule of thumb, I do not update my operating systems when they're first announced because there are always going to be issues. And lately, there have been major issues between Adobe and Apple. I'm not sure what the issue is or what's going on, but let's talk about specifically what's happening with Big Sur. Now, I will say this, if you are finished with your client work and you have time to mess around and you enjoy tech, some of us do, I love tech, some of us hate it, then if it's not a big deal to you, then go ahead and update and play around, but don't expect Photoshop to work. Now, I've heard that Lightroom is performing decently well, although still a little bit slow. My number one tip for Lightroom Performance is to press Command or Control, comma, to get into the preferences, go to the Performance tab, and turn off Use GPU or Performance, like faster, auto. It's usually set to auto or always. Turn that off, and that will improve your performance. I don't know why. It just doesn't seem to work the way it's designed, at least for not most of the people that I know. If everything is working smoothly for you, congratulations. You are most likely an anomaly because for most of us, things are still kind of wacky. Okay, this is what Apple says about Big Sur. I like to read these things because I find them so lofty and hilarious. It says, Mac OS Big Sur elevates the most advanced desktop operating system in the world to a new level of power and beauty. Experience Mac to the fullest with a refined new design. Enjoy the biggest Safari update ever. I don't use Safari. Discover new features for, does anybody use Safari? Discover new features for maps and messages. Don't care, don't use that on my computer. And get even more transparency around your privacy. It says, it's a new experience with unparalleled power. Legendary, ease of use, limitless creativity, refined new design that gives you more things you love. Oh, so far nothing is screaming to me, yeah, you need to update because of this really cool new feature. So I did some investigation with Photoshop's compatibility with Big Sur. Again, Adobe is saying that both Lightroom and Photoshop, the latest versions, and the latest versions only, in fact, it specifically says that older versions of Lightroom are not compatible with Big Sur, but the latest versions are compatible, and then next to it, it says, with known issues. So the Lightroom known issues don't seem to be a showstopper. I haven't heard anyone saying that they're having major issues with Big Sur and Lightroom, but I have heard that there are serious troubles with Photoshop, like completely unstable, won't stay open, crashes every 2 seconds. So what Adobe says about this is Photoshop 22.x, so 22 and later, it is compatible with Big Sur with these known issues. 21 and earlier have not been tested with compatibility. So if you have an older version of Photoshop, I wouldn't go near Big Sur because they're saying 22 is the only one they're even testing and it's compatible, maybe not. So I jumped over to these, what are these known issues? It says Big Sur known issues. Until these updates have been resolved, you may want to remain on your current Mac OS, no kidding, or test in a non-production partition to ensure all of your software and hardware is compatible. I love that Apple and Adobe are putting this on us. We need to test to make sure that it's compatible. Okay, how about it just works? I take issue with this. Listen, I don't expect it to work perfectly. Of course there are going to be issues. I don't have a problem with that. But don't put it on your customer, the consumer, to test it. I mean, test it, fix it, whatever. Okay, whatever. So Adobe says that Photoshop will freeze while using the Save for Web, and a workaround is to use unique file names when using the Save for Web. Okay, I don't use Save for Web, but I've heard that saving in general has been an issue. Like people are reporting that Photoshop is just crashing on them when they try to save. Okay, crash while using filters such as Flame. I don't use that filter. Picture Frame, Tree, I use none of those. Or Liquify. Oh, that got my attention. I use Liquify all the time, Command-Shift-X. I press M for a marquee tool, I create a selection, Command-Shift-X, all the time. And it said it's just gonna probably, most likely, crash when you use Liquify. Okay, out. Fill with pattern is disabled. The pattern option is grayed out when choosing edit fill. I don't typically use that. If I'm using anything to edit fill, it's content aware, so I don't use patterns. Cloud documents sync slowly. No kidding. Okay, I don't use the cloud to save my files, but again, I've heard that it's just crashing all of the time. Okay, Photoshop. Well, this is an entire another story. It says native Apple Silicon compatibility. So Apple Silicon is the new processing chip in the machines that they're, I think it might be out, don't quote me, I didn't look it up if it's out already or coming out with their next series of hardware. That's hardware. And so we're gonna have to be concerned with now, not just software compatibility, but hardware compatibility if you buy a new Apple machine. So either a MacBook Pro, any kind of laptop, or iMac desktop, whatever. It says Photoshop Beta runs natively on Apple devices with M1 processors and can be installed via the Beta Apps tab in the Creative Cloud desktop. Beta versions of Photoshop apps are provided solely for early feedback. Okay, so back in the day, I used to do things like this because I had a couple of extra machines and I had some PC machines and I had some Macs, and I would install beta versions of software to test it for fun, sport. I enjoyed that type of thing. I don't really have that kind of time or hardware currently to do that, so I'm glad that other people do. But what they're talking about here is that the new machine, they must be out, I guess, because if they already have the Photoshop beta, the new Apple machines with this new chip, they're testing it with a beta version, a newer beta version of Photoshop to see if it works. And I used to really enjoy testing products like that. I did it with Lightroom very early on when Lightroom was first announced in its alpha version. It's even before beta. And it's really fun, but I really need an extra machine to do that, and I don't have one that I'm willing to sacrifice. Meaning, this is really a testing laptop, but I still use it for work. So I do all my editing on my big machine, but I wouldn't be willing to sacrifice it, is what I'm saying. Okay, the bottom line here is, if I were you, I would not update to Big Sur yet. As of this video, I'm recording this on December 2nd of 2020. Big Sur was released 2 weeks ago. There's no way on planet Earth I would ever update my operating system only 2 weeks in, not on my main machine. I typically wait a couple of months, but the truth is I've waited an entire year because that one is still not updated to Catalina because I just don't feel comfortable with it yet. I might do it now, maybe after Christmas, heading into like a slower season, January, February, I might update my iMac to Catalina, probably should. And then at some point around that same time, I might be ready to update this to Big Sur so I can come back to you and report. But the first thing I would say is I wouldn't have auto updates turned on for your operating system. So make sure that's turned off, or you might already have it and you don't realize it. A friend of mine inadvertently updated to Big Sur and she's having a ton of issues with Photoshop. So if you use Photoshop, then I definitely wouldn't do it. If you don't and you just use Lightroom, maybe. I mean, again, I haven't heard any major reports of Lightroom having issues with Big Sur, but in general, I have heard people talking about Lightroom performing really slowly for them lately, and I don't know if that's related to the latest Lightroom update. We're on version 10 right now. I'm not sure. I've not experienced that issue, but again, under my performance tab, I make sure that that used GPU is unchecked. So I'm not sure. But anyway, let me know your thoughts. What operating system are you currently on? By the way, for the most part, I only hear major issues, okay, of course it's the only thing I'm paying attention to, with Apple products, so the Mac OS. I don't often hear these conflicts with operating systems and Adobe products on Windows machines. Now, that being said, it did happen on the last version, which is hilarious. It messed up the color spaces. So people were having these issues with exporting files from Lightroom, taking them into Photoshop, opening them in Windows Explorer, and the colors were all kinds of wacky. So that was due to the latest Windows operating system update. But again, typically, that was actually the first time in a couple of years I've heard of it. I'm not saying those issues aren't there. I'm not saying that. I don't have a Windows machine to test, so I don't use it. It's just what I've been seeing and reading on the interwebs. I hope that you found this useful. Make sure you jump into the free community group on Facebook and join us for our live training this week. I'll see you in the next video.